So about 2 days ago, I was approved for an arc for All the Woods Black by Mandelo. It is one of my most anticipated releases for 2024. It is a queer, trans, Appalachian horror romance. Mandelo wrote a book that I did not expect to like called Summer Suns. That was also like a gothic, I believe it was southern romance horror scenario. It was spooky, it was romantic, it was everything, and I loved every second of it. So now I am obsessed, and I cannot wait to pick up this book. So that is what this is going to be. This is going to be just a 24-hour reading of this book, and then a review at the end for one of my most anticipated releases of 2024. So let's get started. So far I am like 60% of the way through All the Woods Black by Mandelo. So far I am loving it so much. So let me give you a brief understanding of what it's about so far. So we're following Leslie, who is a trans nurse that gets specifically asked to come to this small Appalachian town to help with vaccinations, births, whatsoever. It's a super religious town. It's super weird. He was a nurse in World War I, and he is continuing on nursing because it allows certain freedoms that kind of help with his identity, but he really ultimately does not want to be nursing. He wants to be out doing like the things that men do at this time, which is not nursing. But he gets called out there anyway, and he is working in this town trying to get a foothold to do his job, and everyone is just kind of disgusted by him and pushing him to the side, basically just being like, oh, you're not godly, like nurses shouldn't be here, like our medical needs are basically taken care of by the Lord. And there's this really weird, scary priest who is causing lots of problems, while we also have the romantic interest Stevie, who is another trans man, and he is just kind of trying to live his life. People are trying to send him off to get married. Trigger warnings for sexual assault, transphobia, misogyny, violence, things of that nature. And Stevie is basically just like, oh no, these people are getting what's coming for them. Don't even worry. And he keeps like disappearing into the woods, and Leslie's like, what is going on? And Stevie is just like, don't you worry, you just stick around. If you want to see what happens, just stick around. And there's also a tiny aspect so far of some creature horror, some like Appalachian creature horror. 60% of the way in, we're not really that far along with that concept. So ultimately at this point, we've got some romance going on, we've got some like religious trauma and religious horror, but we have not quite peeked in on the Appalachian horror aspect of it. I can feel it coming, like I can see the points where it is supposed to be coming through, but 60% of the way in, we're not there yet. I'm loving it. It's fantastic. The writing is gorgeous. It's gothic. It's detailed. It's just fantastic. I finished The Woods All Black by Mandelo today. I feel like I have so many things to say. Okay, she's got some things to say too. So we have a lot of things to say today. And let me just start off by saying that this book was not what I expected it at all. When you say trans Appalachian horror, this is not what you expect at all. I expected something that really had to do with a lot more of the horror and the lore that I hear around the Appalachian area, and the sense of, oh, I would never want to go there because the people who live there like are badass as hell for putting up with those fears. And that's not what I would call this at all. I would call this trans-religious vengeance, Appalachian erotic horror. Yeah, I know that's a really long description, but that is what I'm going to call it. So, if you are someone who is interested in two trans boys, religious trauma, respecting the woods, respecting the earth, and some serious revenge, this one's for you. So let's crack this open and get started. So The Woods All Black by Lee Mandelo follows our main character, Leslie, who is a trans man in 1920s Appalachia. He is a nurse, and he is getting sent to this small town in the Appalachian Mountains that requested him. And once he gets there, he walks into an incredibly hostile environment that clearly doesn't want them there for religious reasons. But he is just there to try and do his job. He is a World War I veteran. I don't know if I call him a veteran. He was a nurse in World War I. So he's got the trauma of a veteran, but I don't know if that's officially what they call them. So he has been through much worse than being ousted by some religious freaks. But he ends up getting in some pretty nasty scenarios regarding this, and he watches as he notices another trans boy in town being ostracized and abused by the town itself. Because they're religious Christian zealots. And in comes Stevie, our chaotic, beautiful love interest. Stevie is a trans boy who is very mysterious, very in and out throughout the entire story, and is really a compelling force within the story itself. This story would not have happened without Stevie, and that's very important to say. This story without Stevie would just be Leslie going in, being ostracized by the community, getting pretty much nothing done, and then heading out when they were like, hey, we're kicking you out, get the hell out. So Stevie is the story. Like, we're following Leslie, but Stevie is the story. And I love that about Stevie. Stevie and Leslie go through some shenanigans. There is some sort of, like, horrifying creature that's kind of walking around the woods that we only get super brief glances of. So we got the piece of the creature probably like 50 or 60% of the way through, and I totally thought that the creature horror of this was going to be a higher aspect of this story. And I'm not going to say that it's not an important aspect of the story, but the creature aspect of this story gets 18 plus in a way that is very seriously 18 plus, that we will kind of talk about a little bit later. Now that you've kind of got the gist of the story, I feel like that's everything that you really need to know about the story. So let's kind of talk about my reaction to the book, I guess. Let me just start off by saying that this book is a 5 stars for me. I loved it. This is not my first Lee Mandelo book at all. I've read Summer Suns by him, which I surprisingly really liked. If you know me as a person, I should not have liked Summer Suns, but I really did. Like, I think I gave it like a 4.5. So I was walking into The Woods All Black with a very specific expectation, and a very specific expectation of what the outcome would be as my most anticipated release of 2024. One of those expectations was met. The other one was not. I expected to walk in to a like creature horror, gothic, Appalachian horror. Like kind of giving off some of the vibes that Andrew Joseph White gives off in the way that he handles like romantic relationships. That is not what I got. I was also expecting to walk away with a 4 or 5 star for this as one of my most anticipated releases of 2024. That was achieved because I adored this book. This book was 150 pages, give or take, and we could have gone on forever. We could have gone on forever in my eyes. I had such a great time, and it was the buildup of everything. It was the atmosphere, it was the gothic nature, it was the way in which the story was told, it was the character development. It was, in the end, I feel so odd for saying this, but for some reason, you know what, trans horror really knows how to do erotic revenge. Oh my god. I'm not a gore person. This book definitely has some severe trigger warnings for gore, violence, death, sexual assault. That's off page, it's not detailed, but it is definitely there. And some religious bigotry and trauma and violence. So there's definitely like some hardcore trigger warnings here, but oh my god, erotic trans revenge stories are just getting like out there in the best way possible, and this is one of them. So we're gonna keep that part to the end in case you don't want to hear about that, because it's a little gruesome, and that's okay. So the gothic nature of this, I feel like, really kind of holds up to my idea of Appalachia. So I know nothing really about the Appalachian Mountains other than they are scary and not to be messed with. So I will never go there because I am not dumb and I don't want to mess with that. I don't have enough social awareness or like awareness of what's going on around me to do that. So that's not my vibe, but I like to read about it. So this is kind of like a dark, spooky, but earthy atmosphere throughout the entire thing. Like you feel like the trees are kind of alive around you in a very subtle aspect. And I feel like I got that out of every single page of this writing. And it was a really interesting atmosphere to be a part of. I enjoyed it so much. And it's just a testament to how intense and strong of a writer Lee Mandelo is. And then moving on and kind of looking at the story structure itself, I think it was a really interesting story to tell from Leslie's perspective. I like that it was told from an outsider's perspective because Leslie knew from the beginning what was going on in the religious aspect of it. For the most part, he understood like this was not a good scenario to be in and that this preacher is bad vibes all around. Bad vibes. And the women in this town are bad vibes and everyone all around is just bad vibes. He understands that from the start, but he's so enticed by Stevie and the mystery of Stevie walking up and being like, oh, you want to know what happens? Stick around till tomorrow. That happens more than once! Stevie. Oh, Stevie. So to tell this story from the perspective of Leslie, I think is so interesting because you get that outside perspective of like, oh, I know that I should really be out of here. I know that I should be leaving. I know that this was a bad idea. But this like grungy boy, he's so cute. He's such a vibe. I can't just leave him. And I'm like, Leslie, realistically, you could leave him. You can tell that he is trouble and that he can take care of himself. But that's not the point. We wouldn't have the story if Leslie wasn't there. And I think also that the war trauma that was kind of tied into Leslie's perspective also made the story so much more interesting. I think it was really smart to tell the story from Leslie's perspective for his background, for his purpose of being there, and for the enticing nature that he feels towards Stevie. Like, it all is just a concoction to bring together a really good and interesting main character that I feel like develops really well throughout the story, even though not much happens to him. Honestly, he goes there to be a nurse. He gets snuffed by the community continuously. He keeps trying. And they tell him, you're banned, get out. And then something really bad happens. They find contraceptives. That's when things really started to go wrong. That's when things kind of started to like really pick up. And I would say that the last like 20% of the book really just went like bam, 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 which was super interesting and I enjoyed it a lot. So the writing style is beautiful. The main character is super interesting and tells a dynamic perspective and gives really good insight into the community and our love interest. Let's talk about like the Appalachian aspect of it. So my expectation with the Appalachian aspect of it was I really was expecting something that felt more like some of the horror stories that I hear on Reddit about Appalachia, and those ultimately lean more towards creepypasta, I feel like, a lot of the time. But I also know that there are like some very specific creatures in the Appalachian Mountains that the indigenous population is just like, oh hell no, hell no. I'm like, fair, if you say hell no, then I say, oh hell no, absolutely not. And I also forgot for a second how old the Appalachian Mountains are. So they are not the highest peak in the United States because they are so incredibly old. They are like old. And they are a mountain range to be heavily respected and not fucked with. And I was expecting the creature horror part of it, where what I really think that I got more of was the age and the intensity of the forest and the mountains themselves, which is not something that I expected, but God, was it beautiful. It was beautiful in a horrifying way, where the earth seems to know we can help you, but it comes at a cost. And it's not really like we look at it as a cost, but Stevie, the one who paid the price, doesn't really look at it as a cost because he feels like he is like with the forest. He was born there. His family was from there. Like, this is his forest. This is his life. He is one with it. And I think that that is the part of the Appalachian story that kind of gets told with this, which was super unexpected but super welcomed. And I thought it was gorgeous. I thought it was beautiful. I don't know if the people of Appalachia would appreciate this rendition of it, but I personally, from what I can tell, it seems to be respectful and honoring of the mountains rather than just turning them into like a creature flick, which I really enjoyed. It was not expected, but I enjoyed it. From there, okay, so let me give out the warning now that we're going to start talking about the erotic nature of Stevie. And I am not going to give spoilers. I am not going to give spoilers, but I am going to give like vague ideas of things when it comes to Stevie. So Stevie, this all happens pretty soon in the story. Stevie was sexually assaulted, and had originally gone to Leslie for help, and then he was like, nah, I'm gonna do it myself. And off he goes, and he deals with things himself, and he becomes this like chaotic shadow in the wind, basically, for this entire story, where he just comes up to Leslie and he's like, you want to know what happens? Stick around till tomorrow. You want to know what happens? Oh, you just wait. I'll show you. And you're just like, Stevie, how dare you be like this level of attractive right now as an absolute chaos demon. And he is a chaos demon. When it comes to Stevie is a great example of, I feel like, an intro to erotic horror. I am not someone who reads erotic horror. Actually, I might be becoming someone who reads erotic horror. That was unintentional. Apparently this is becoming my vibe. I feel like this was still a good intro to erotic horror because it's not, like, always erotic. It's not smut. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and say it's smut. I think that it is erotic horror. And it gives a reminiscent vibe of The Monster of Eldenhaven by Jennifer Gets Brecht and Manhunt. It gives off, like, beautiful, violent, gory revenge sex. And for some reason, it is the most beautiful and erotic situation that I feel like I've ever read. And you know what? It has no right to be this way. It is two trans boys in a river being one with the mountains. It was incredibly well written. It was incredibly interesting, and I felt like, as a trans person, Lee Mandelo did such an incredibly wonderful job at portraying trans sex. Like, it's vulgar and it's gender affirming despite not medically transitioning. And the dynamic between Leslie and Stevie are just beautiful in like a trans kind of way. I don't really know how to get into that, but you read stories with trans characters when you are a trans person, and you just feel like incredibly affirmed. Like, things all of a sudden feel like they are slotting into place, and your place in society doesn't always feel very welcomed or anything like that, but when you read these kinds of things, it becomes like a session of inner love, I feel like. And Lee Mandelo did such an incredible job at uplifting trans beauty while also uplifting severe revenge and eroticism in horror. Don't get me wrong. This story was beautiful, it was gothic, it was interesting. It is a revenge story. It is revenge on the religious zealots who have done them wrong. 100%. It is bathing in the blood of those who have wronged them in the middle of these millennia old forests and mountains, and just drinking in the energy of the old while basking in the gore, picking out chunks of meat from their teeth. It's just stunning. It's stunning. I feel like I can't say much more now that I've been talking for like 26 minutes in this review. You need to read this. If you are someone who is interested in Andrew Joseph White, that's a great person to compare to. Religious horror, religious revenge, trans beauty, and the intensity of Appalachia. I would recommend this so hard. It was so worth it in every capacity. I loved it so much. 5 stars. Lee Mandelo is very quickly coming to the top of my auto-buy authors at this point. I'm really getting into horror lately, so like Andrew Joseph White, Allie Will, Gretchen Felker Martin. So realistically, I'm just super hardcore getting into trans horror right now. And you know what? Oh, Rivers Solomon does incredible horror. Incredible. So if you are into any of those people, I would really recommend giving Lee Mandelo a try, giving this book a try. It's only 150 pages, and it is so worth the time. And I'm not even going to say effort, because you know what? It felt effortless reading this. I feel like I ate this up. Like, I didn't want to put it down. So, The Woods All Black by Lee Mandelo releases on March 19th of 2024, just in time for you to pick it up for the Trans Rights Readathon. That starts on March 22nd and goes till March 29th. So, if you are looking to populate your Trans Rights Readathon with some good old trans horror, pick this up. It's totally worth it. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic day, and I will see y'all for the Trans Rights Readathon starting March 22nd. Bye.